It's time to get back to the basics. In this video, I'm going to walk you through some effective strategies to make the most of census research, identify patterns over time, avoid common pitfalls, and even explore some resources outside of the U.S. Hey there, I'm Lisa Lisson with Are You My Cousin, and I'm a genealogy expert with over 15 years of experience helping others grow their family tree. On this YouTube channel, I share strategies, tips, and tools to help you not only find your ancestors, but grow your family tree without being overwhelmed. Today's video is brought to you by archives.com, your trusted resource in finding your family history. Archives is a vast repository of historical records, offering a seamless journey through your family's past. Imagine if finding long-lost relatives, exploring genealogical documents, and tracing the roots that define your story. Archives makes research quick and easy with an intuitive approach to genealogy. They keep their search tools simple, but behind the scenes, their extensive record collections are paired with a powerful technology to deliver valuable results. Archives is a valuable resource if you want to make your research simple and affordable. Just visit archives.com and let your journey begin. I will have a link for them in the description below. Recently, I was talking with someone I met on vacation about their genealogy research. She was new to researching her ancestors and was just getting into census records. We had a lovely conversation talking about the census records, and I shared with her the basics that she needed to know to make sure she didn't miss important clues at that early stage of her research. And it got me thinking, no matter how many years that we've been researching our ancestors, it never hurts to return to the basics. I know I certainly made a lot of mistakes starting out. And there are times now, even as I'm going through those census records, I'm thinking, oh, rats, I missed it. I've got to go back to the previous one I was looking at. Let me look at that one more time. What did I miss? Did I miss a vital clue? So I think it's really helpful to get back to the basics when it comes to our research. So keep watching because I'm going to be walking you step by step through some census examples. So first up, let's start with the basics. What can you actually find in the census record? What is it actually telling you? Now, in most census records, you'll get the key details such as their name, their age, their gender, birthplace, occupation, and family relationships. Now, certainly this does vary by census year. Now, these basics are foundational for piecing together your family history, but they can tell you so much more. In some census years, you might even find unique columns for information on military service information, the birthplace of the parents, naturalization and immigration status of the individual, and certainly even the address, the street address of an individual. And this can add layers to your research. Taking note of these details across the census years makes it easier to trace your ancestor, especially if they were on the move. Now, I mentioned earlier that one of the nice things about genealogy research in the census records that I think that we often can easily miss, particularly early if we're new to census research, is analyzing patterns of the family over time. And I think this is actually one of my favorite things when I track ancestors through the census records. I like seeing these patterns that kind of unfold over time. When you track the same family from one census year to the next, what can be revealed are some interesting changes in family dynamics. So for instance, you might notice that with each census that was taken, so every 10 years, you find that ancestor moving. Now that could reflect things such as an occupational change, or maybe they just have kind of more of a wandering lifestyle, but that can be a pattern that you start to pick up. Another pattern you might see is that the same neighbors continue to appear alongside your ancestors, your ancestors in his family, his or her family, every time the census is taken. So every 10 years, you're finding your ancestor in the family. You're also noticing that you are seeing these same neighbors that are appearing beside them. And this can indicate very strong community bonds. This can indicate perhaps potential, a blood relation. Perhaps they have, it's an in-law or a cousin. It may not be immediately apparent if they're actually related or not, but can potentially show or indicate a strong connection between the families. And that's something that we can potentially use further down the line in our research, just kind of keeping it in the back of our minds. Because it may come into play a little bit further into your more advanced research. So my point here is the patterns that you're seeing are not just coincidences. They are clues to your ancestors' lives, and you don't want to miss them. Now, if you are like me and you love to do census research to find your ancestors, be sure and hit that like button and let me know. I am just sure I have lots of fellow genealogy researchers out there who absolutely love pulling the stories of your ancestors from the pages of those census records. Now, as you go through census records, something that might come up, particularly if you're just getting started in U.S. Census records or any census records, is the language and terminology that is being used. That language and terminology does reflect the time period that they were created in. Now, another question I get frequently when it comes to census research is we might be very good at U.S. census research, but might struggle a bit when we get outside of the U.S. and are using the census records in other countries. Now, each country has its own way of organizing the census data, so make sure you take time to understand how a census for that particular country is structured. Knowing these distinctions up front can make it easier for you to find your ancestor and not get tripped up by formatting and informational differences. Okay, so now I'm going to actually turn my camera around. I'm going to take you over into the census records and walk you step by step, kind of through a basic analysis of that census record. And for those of you who are a little bit more advanced, I'm going to walk you through an analysis where I bring out some other clues and more advanced clues that you would be using a little bit further down the line in your research. So I've got something for both you as the beginners and you as a little more advanced researcher. So let's take a look. Now we're over here looking at a 1910 population census for the U.S. I'm going to enlarge this so it's a little bit easier to see. There we go. And if you are just starting out and you are a beginner and you are here at this particular census record, you want to first off verify, do you have the right people? Do you have the right family? And so if you were researching the Samuel Talbot family, we have his wife Sally, and we have his 3 children, Samuel, Lyle, and Annie. So if you're like, yes, I have found my family, I need to make sure I'm getting all the information that I can about this family. And so what you're going to do before I go any further, I do pop up here at the top, and I want to look and make sure I've got the right state. And we're in Bedford County, so I know what county they're in. I know they're in the 1st Magistrate District, so I know what district they're in. And I know that this census record is enumerated or has been taken and recorded on the 25th of April, 1910. So making sure I've got all of those background pieces in place before I go. It takes just a few seconds to verify all that, guys, and you make sure you know where your ancestor is in a particular time in a particular county. All right. So we're going to take a peek here. We're going to look at Samuel. We've got his wife, Sally. And again, Samuel is the head of the household. And that's important to know because all of these relationships that are listed for Sally and for the children, the relationship status is always relationship to head of household. So perhaps, if Annie was a cousin and not a daughter, it would be cousin to Samuel, not necessarily, say, Sally's cousin. So you want to make sure that you keep that in mind. All of the relationships for this one would be in relation to the head of the household. We have their gender, we have their ethnicity or their race, we have their age. Now, age is important, guys, because we want to find that year of birth to potentially find birth records. So we have to do a little bit of math, but that's not a problem, guys. We have little Annie here. She's 4 years old. This is the 1910 census. She was born about 1906. Keep in mind, if you're new to census research, that the ages sometimes vary. They may not always be completely accurate. And so you just want to keep that in mind and going forward. So you may find some discrepancies, but as you go and find those birth records, you'll be able to solve any discrepancies that you find. We know that they were married, so this would be their marital status. And we have M1 and M2. So Sally, this indicates this is Sally's first marriage. But the M2 indicates that for Samuel, this is not necessarily his first marriage. It's his second or a subsequent marriage. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a second marriage. It could possibly be a third marriage. But the 2 indicates just that it's a subsequent marriage. This is the number of years that they have been in this particular marriage. They've been married for 20 years. We can do the math. They were married about 1890. This is a really interesting column here that it gives us kind of an insight into Sally's life that she has given birth to 5 children and only 3 are living. So that tells us that she has lost 2 children, perhaps as young children or babies. And it gives us kind of an insight into the hardships that Sally has experienced in her life. And we know that each of these individuals is born in Virginia. So they haven't left Virginia. Samuel and Sally were born in Virginia. Their children were born in Virginia. And so they have not left the area, it appears. And so that will help you narrow down. A search for a marriage record or a birth record is likely going to be there in Virginia. So it's keeping everything kind of close. To take your research a little bit further, we want to make sure we understand that, it tells us that Samuel's father was born in Virginia and that his mother was also born in Virginia. Same thing for Sally. Both the parents were born in Virginia. This is a really valuable clue as you progress with your research, because you know that the family pretty much stayed in the area. So that's a good thing to know. They certainly may have moved within Virginia, but you know that you're primarily going to be looking at Virginia records there. They all speak English. This is important. So if they do speak a different language, is that for their native tongue, then that can indicate a point of origin for the family. So that could be important, always checking that. We have occupation. Samuel's a laborer and he works within the railroad industry. So can be helpful as you progress with research further on. So for those who are a little bit more advanced, there are some railroad records that potentially could be beneficial to the research, but that would not be something you would start with, certainly. He is not self-employed, indicating he works for a company. He has not been out of work. And in the past year, he's had no weeks out of work. So he's had steady employment. That's a good thing. That's obviously a good thing for the family. He can read and he can write. He also can own his own home, which is important to know because it tells us he's got steady income, he's working, and they have the finances to own their own home. So as you're starting out your census research, you notice I basically went column by column to make sure I understood what was in each column and what that could tell me or potentially mean to my ancestors. And that's essentially what we do as researchers. So regardless of the census record year that you are researching, this is the same process that you're going to do. I did want to show you a pre-1850 census record and how I would look at this, because obviously prior to 1850, so 1790 up to 1840, we only had the heads of households that were listed to the left here, and other household members were listed as numbers or tick marks in appropriate age and gender categories. Now, for those starting out, I often hear they get to the census record and they're like, oh, wow, what do I do here? I don't quite know how to go about this. And so it can feel a little daunting, but I don't want it to. Just remember, take your time and make sure you look and understand what each column is telling you. So let's take a quick look at this. So let me enlarge this a little bit for you. As you can see right here, this is Campbell County in the Southern District. Over here, so oftentimes you'll find that on the side. And we have the names of the heads of families. So we can look through these and we can see the heads of the family, each of the individuals. Now, one of the things you'll notice looking at the heads of the household is that they are overwhelmingly mostly men, right? But we do find women listed as heads of the household. Likely these two are widows, but we don't know that for sure. All right, we just know that they are the head of the household or head of the family. So let's take a quick look here. Again, going column by column. And so what we notice, this is the county and the district they were in, this first column that we looked at. We are going to look at Margaret Maddox. We see that Margaret has 2 children, 2 white males between the ages of 5 and under 10. So like 5 to 9. We keep kind of going across, and I usually enlarge my cursor so I can keep up with it a little easier on the screen. She has 1 white female in the household under 5. She has 1 who is 5 to under 10. So again, 5 to 9. She has 1 white female in their age 10 to under 14. All right, and then there's 1 white female age 20 to under 30. Okay, so 20 to 29. This would likely represent Margaret. She's the oldest female in the house. And these others are likely her children. But again, we don't know. Perhaps it's, a niece or a nephew that she has in the household. So we can't say we know the actual relationship, but we can use a working theory that perhaps these are her children as kind of a working theory that we need to flesh out a little bit more. So we do know a bit of the makeup of the house. 1 adult, and we have 5 children. So this is a household of 6 children. So each of these categories, as you come up here, we have free white persons. Here we have males, females coming across. This is kind of a ledger style book. We'll have if there's a free colored person here in the household, not in her particular household, do we have that? And what you do want to make sure though is that you go and there is a second page to this particular year, would be to open and go make sure you are checking page 2 on this. Now, we know that she was number 2 on here, and so I would count down 2 entries and see here. So she has no enslaved individuals in her household, and this is a household with a total of 6 people in it. And it looks like The number of persons in each family employed in agriculture would be 2, likely Margaret herself and probably an older daughter in the household who are working the farm. All right, so again, making sure this is how I would go and evaluate this 1840 census, and then using that along with other census records, other census records, other birth records, I would be able to hopefully identify who each of the children are by name by comparing this record with other records that we can find. Now, I hope you found that helpful. And if you would like to learn more about how to avoid some pitfalls for your census research, watch the video on your screen now. 5 mistakes you are making in your census research.